Magic and sexuality have always been intertwined. Both deal with power, desire, transformation, and the mysteries of life and death. To speak of one without the other is to miss a crucial part of the human experience. Where religion often sought to restrict sexual expression, magic has historically embraced it as sacred, dangerous, and potent. Whether in fertility rites, ecstatic rituals, or modern practices of sex magic, sexuality is not simply a biological function but a gateway into the mysteries of being. Long before the word magic was coined, human beings understood that sexuality was bound up with creation itself. Fertility rites across cultures celebrated the union of masculine and feminine, sky and earth, god and goddess. Ancient temples dedicated to Inanna in Mesopotamia or to Hathor in Egypt often included ritualized sexual practices. These were not framed as debauchery, but as acts of devotion designed to mirror the generative powers of the gods. In Greece, the cult of Dionysus used ecstatic rites involving dancing, intoxication, and erotic energy to dissolve the boundaries of the self. In India, tantric traditions taught that sexual energy could be transmuted into spiritual awakening. The Shakti, or divine feminine power, was not only the source of pleasure but also of liberation. From these ancient roots, we see the same theme repeat. Sexuality was not merely tolerated, it was celebrated as one of the strongest conduits of the sacred. With the rise of Christianity in Europe, sexuality became bound in shame and control. Desire was framed as sinful, something to be resisted or punished. Sexual pleasure was demonized, especially outside the sanctioned union of marriage. This shift was not accidental. By controlling sexuality, the church gained control over one of the most fundamental aspects of human life. It is no surprise then that magical traditions, often existing outside the official church, preserved sexuality as sacred. Witches were accused of orgiastic sabbats, and while much of this was fantasy projected by fearful clergy, there were genuine folk practices that linked fertility, pleasure, and magic. The phallic maypole dance of Beltane, for instance, celebrated sexual union as a renewal of life. Thus, sexuality became a site of rebellion against the dominant religious order. What the church labeled devilish was, in many cases, the survival of older traditions that understood the erotic as divine. Magic is never abstract, it is lived through the body. Breath, blood, rhythm, and touch are central to ritual work. Sexual energy is perhaps the most immediate and accessible source of power within the body. It can flood the senses, alter consciousness, and carry practitioners into states of ecstasy where the veil between the human and the divine thins. This is why many magical systems treat sexual energy as a vital force to be cultivated and directed. The body itself becomes the altar, and orgasm the offering. The magician is both priest and sacrifice, channel and vessel. Such ideas are not only symbolic. Neurologically, sexual arousal changes brain chemistry, releasing hormones and neurotransmitters that alter perception and open gateways to trance states. This biological foundation explains why sexuality has always been so effective in ritual contexts. It genuinely transforms the practitioner's state of consciousness. In the modern Western occult revival, sexuality found new expression in what came to be known as sex magic. Figures like Aleister Crowley and the Ordo Templi Orientis in the early 20th century explicitly incorporated sexual practices into magical ritual. For Crowley, sexual energy was the highest form of magical power, capable of charging talismans, invoking spirits, and uniting the magician with the divine. Later in the 20th century, the broader occult revival brought sexuality into focus in new ways. As esoteric groups grew bolder, practitioners began to speak more openly about the erotic ritual, energy work, and the use of orgasm as a means of directing will. What had long been hinted at in symbols or encoded in allegory was now treated as a practical method. Sexuality was increasingly recognized not as something peripheral to magic, but as one of its most direct and powerful engines. Sex magic was revolutionary, not just in practice, but in principle. It rejected the morality of repression and instead declared that the very things society considered taboo, pleasure, desire, lust, were the raw material of spiritual attainment. Yet, sexuality and magic is not only about liberation, it also forces practitioners to confront their shadows. Desire can be selfish, manipulative, or destructive. The same energy that can create can also enslave. Magical traditions have long recognized this duality. In ritual contexts, sexuality demands consent, clarity, and intent. Without these, it can easily become exploitation disguised as spirituality. Many abuses within occult and New Age communities stem from a failure to honor this truth. Power dynamics in sexual magic are volatile and must be handled with integrity. From a psychological perspective, working with sexuality also exposes deep wounds and conditioning. Shame, trauma, and repression can surface in powerful ways. Rather than avoiding these, magical practice often seeks to transmute them, to make the shadow conscious and integrated. Thus, sexuality becomes not just a tool of power, but a path of healing. Of course, I think it goes without saying, or maybe it does, that exploring this aspect of sexuality should be done alongside seeing a good therapist that can help you through the various wounds and traumas that might arise. In many magical systems, sexual energy is framed in terms of polarity: masculine and feminine, active and receptive, sun and moon. This polarity is not about gender in a biological or social sense, but about archetypal forces. In ritual, uniting these polarities symbolizes the union of opposites that generates creation itself. For example, in Wiccan tradition, the Great Rite is a ritual act that symbolizes the sacred union of God and Goddess. It may be performed symbolically with blade and chalice, or literally through sexual intercourse. In either case, the act embodies the principle that creation emerges from the union of complementary forces. However, modern practitioners increasingly challenge rigid binaries, recognizing that sexual energy is more fluid than strict male female categories suggest. Queer magicians, for instance, emphasize that polarity can be found in any dynamic of attraction, desire, or complementarity, regardless of gender identity. The mystery is not bound to bodies, but flows through the unique interplay of energies between individuals. Sexual magic is not limited to partners. Solo practices, from tantric breathwork to masturbation rituals, allow practitioners to raise and direct energy without another person present. The essence of solo sex magic is simple: arouse the body, focus the mind on an intention or symbol, and release energy at the peak of orgasm to charge that intention. Some traditions emphasize holding back orgasm to intensify energy. Others use release as the moment of magical projection. In both approaches, the practitioner learns to harness pleasure as a source of will. The body becomes an engine for magic, capable of fueling spells, visions, and transformations without external tools. Sexual experience often carries the quality of initiation. The loss of virginity, the first encounter with another's desire, the surrender of the body to ecstasy, all can mark thresholds in personal and spiritual development. Many magical traditions consciously ritualize this, framing sexuality as a rite of passage into deeper mysteries. At the same time, initiation through sexuality is not without risk. It requires maturity, respect, and guidance. When undertaken with awareness, it can open the practitioner to profound experiences of connection with self, other, and the divine. When undertaken carelessly, it can lead to exploitation and harm. In today's world, discussions of sexuality are often split between extremes. On one hand, commodification and pornography; on the other, moralistic condemnation. Magic offers a third path, the reintegration of sexuality as being sacred. This does not mean sanctifying every sexual act, but rather recognizing that sexuality has the potential to be transformative. When approached with mindfulness, intention, and reverence, erotic energy can reconnect us to life itself, reminding us that creation, pleasure, and spirit are inseparable. For some, this may take the form of ritual sex within a coven or partnership. For others, it may mean solo practices of sexual meditation. For others still, it may simply mean embracing sexuality without shame and understanding it as a gift of the body and soul. Magic and sexuality share the same heartbeat. Both are about reaching beyond the ordinary, touching the mystery, and transforming reality. Both can liberate or enslave, heal or harm, depending on how they are approached. To embrace sexuality and magic is to honor the body as sacred, to acknowledge desire as a force of creation, and to recognize pleasure as a path to the divine. It is to stand at the threshold where flesh and spirit meet, and to know that this union is itself a spell, a sacrament, and a source of power. In the end, sexuality is not something to be hidden in the shadows or locked away in shame. It is the fire at the heart of life. To work with it magically is to work with the very essence of what it means to be human and to touch, even for a moment, the divine. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time. Cheers for now. Bye bye.